Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, our traditional greeting, wherever you may be in the world. Whether you're watching live or on YouTube, welcome to another in this, our third season of FIPP Insider webinars. Now, for all of our recent focus on business models, it's important to never lose sight of the fundamental thing that makes our industry tick, which is, of course, content and storytelling. And today I'm delighted to welcome back one of the most popular speakers from the recent FIPP Congress. He's going to show us the results of some work that he and his colleagues have been doing on the future of content creation and delivery. But before I introduce my guest, some housekeeping. This session is very much a conversation, so please don't hesitate to make yourself part of it. Ask questions using the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen, or chat to the other guests and presenters using the chat button. We'd love to hear from you. This webinar is being provided free of charge, courtesy of our corporate sponsors UPM and PressReader. They do so much to support us and our industry, and we thank them once again for all their support. I'd also like to thank all of our FIPP members, some of whom are on this call today. A reminder that soon our content is going behind our membership wall, and this project has already kicked off and will be live very soon. So if you don't want to miss out on the fantastic range of content and insight that we produce, white papers, features, videos, or podcasts, as well as courses taking advantage of our networking services, well, make sure you join FIPP today. Now, you can do that by writing to me at james@fipp.com. Once the site goes live, you'll also be able to join through the site itself. So it's now time for me to introduce my guest for today. Will Roth is VP, Content and Strategy at the Foundry, which is Meredith's in-house custom content studio. Now, over the past few months, Will and his team have been working on a white paper in which they've set out their vision for the future of content, and I'm delighted that Will is able to join me today to discuss their findings. So welcome, Will.
Thank you, James. It's a pleasure to be here with all you, and thank you to the international crowd with us, whether it's late in the day or early in the day for you if you're near me. Really appreciate you making the time. Looking forward to the conversation.
A very global audience as ever. Welcome to FIPP Insider. Great to have you on again after your successful stint on the FIPP Congress. I think I won't spare your blushes, and I'll tell everybody that you were the second most watched video of the FIPP Congress. So that's why we've got you back, I think. But I wanted to start by asking you to tell everybody about the Foundry, because they may not be familiar with you and what you do. So just give us an overview of what the Foundry is and what you do within that.
Of course, and I'm actually going to start even higher level, because we talk a lot about Meredith, but what we have to remember is that Meredith is not a consumer-facing brand, and people often forget that Meredith is the largest company you've never heard of. We house north of 40 of America's largest publishing brands, from People and Entertainment Weekly to Food and Wine and All Recipes, Travel and Leisure, Midwest Living, Southern Living, Better Homes and Gardens. The list goes on and on and on. We are a company that reaches 95% of American women. And Foundry is Meredith's dedicated in-house content studio. What does that mean? It means that we are responsible for ideating, executing, and distributing every bit of custom content that we create on behalf of an advertiser that is distributed from our brand portfolio. And when I say distributed from our brand portfolio, I'm talking about, of course, our owned and operated websites, our print magazines, but also our social platforms and other endeavors that we're playing around in, for example, like OTT, in the audio space, podcasting, etc. So,
you're right, Meredith is the biggest company you've never heard of, the biggest publisher in America now, with some of those fantastic brands, including People magazine and others that people will have heard of, Real Simple and so on. We've called this webinar The Future of Content, which is a very kind of ambitious title for us to have. But,
it is.
I know you're going to justify it in what you're going to tell us.
It may be delusional, James. I don't know. I wasn't born with a crystal ball, but we took our best guesses.
The future of content right now, anyway. Now, people can download the report from the link that we've put in the chat. So if you want to go in there and have a look at the white paper that we're talking about, please do so. And you can also see a link there to the Foundry as well, so you can have a look at some of Will's work. Now, if you're watching on YouTube, the links will be in the video description as well. So make sure you go in and do that. But Will, tell us, first of all, what prompted you to create this white paper?
So I think a lot of it was kind of instincts where, the first several months of the pandemic, we also in America, we saw an unbelievable upswell of cultural unrest in the aftermath of George Floyd's murder. We were also in the middle of a campaign season that was as ugly as we've ever seen it here. And all of those factors dramatically disrupted our ability to create things. And that's true for Foundry. It's true for ad agencies, every other branded content shop, both in America and in many ways all across the world. And I think this endeavor, in so many ways, was our attempt at trying to make sense of the road ahead. And I think that what we really wanted to do was to stop being so reactive to what was happening and instead have a go forward view of what we could expect to happen and prepare for it accordingly. So we're going to dive into the specifics of what that means, James, but I think that really at the end of the day, we wanted the ground underneath us to feel more. And I think the more that we dove into the trends and the insights that we were able to gather from our mountain of first party data, we knew that there were certain things that if we used as kind of guideposts for us moving forward, it would allow us to keep creating great content, perhaps with new restraints and new tactics, but we could keep creating great content for our advertisers quickly and in a timely way for the marketplace.
It's one of the things that people often forget about Meredith, isn't it? You've got this enormous base of data because you reach pretty much every woman in America consumes some kind of Meredith product.
That's absolutely right. We know, we truly know more about the American woman than any other publishing house and arguably most any other company in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're able to use the insights from that data, I guess, to inform what you've written, not only in this white paper, but what you do for your clients. That's
exactly right. And I think, when you look at the branded content space, pre-pandemic, insights were an extremely hot commodity and agencies were demanding that you support every creative assertion with a first party insight to support it. And I think that, what we did was clever, especially relatively early, where we committed, as one of the benefits of being a major public company in the United States is we can resource accordingly. And we actually built out a dedicated insights team for branded content. Obviously, Meredith had been doing, deep dive, big data, crunches and insight generation, especially in the editorial space. But Foundry, saw its value, and we built out a dedicated team to help us translate big data into actionable creative insights, because people like me can't make sense of big data. But data people with a creative lean can help turn those big data points into really actionable creative insights that guys can run with.
Yeah, I think making sense of big data is definitely an art that we all struggle with at various times. You mentioned at the beginning that this is sort of making sense of where we are in the world at the moment. Do you see this report as being very much influenced purely by COVID, or are these trends things that you think apply regardless of the time that we're living in?
So I think if you had asked me that question, when you asked me that question at the World Congress, I think my initial thought was that these would be insights kind of most applicable in the relatively short term. I think that the way I was thinking about it is almost a pre-vaccine and a post-vaccine world where these insights would really apply to pre-vaccine. As time's gone on, though, and as we've applied these insights into campaigns that we've actually created and run, we know that a lot of these tactics actually translate to higher engagement and better delivery for our clients. So I think that what we're seeing is actually a number of these tweaks that we've pursued to the way that we do business actually translates to more organic and authentic content experiences that we're going to want to keep replicating, even when we can go put 50 people in a video village for a major campaign shoot.
I was going to say that they all seem like fairly timeless subjects, and I think we'll dig into that as we look at them. But I wanted to ask you, with your kind of big picture hat on, you guys at the Foundry, you operate in this space where you're looking at brands, you look at consumers. What are you seeing in the current environment about, first of all, the way that brands are connecting with their consumers? How has that changed?
So I think that it's changed a fair amount, and I think that more and more we're seeing, like right now, Foundry is busier than we have ever been in the history of us being a studio. So Foundry's been around for about 5 years. This quarter right now, both from a volume and revenue standpoint, is the largest we've ever seen. Now that it's kind of astonishing. Like, we're hockey sticking all over again. And it's really fun. It's also a little scary, right? Because it's just a mountain of work. But I think what we're seeing is advertisers recognizing the fact that their partners, especially the ones who create great content and who have a major reach, are seeing sky high engagement, like much, much, much higher than we had seen pre-COVID and even in years past. What we know, right, is with people like you and me and all of those listening working from home, that people have more time to consume content. So we're seeing, stronger subscription bases in our magazine business. We're seeing extraordinary digital performance from brands like People and All Recipes in particular. And we know that we have people's attention. And I think what advertisers have recognized now, especially after having kind of pressed pause in the middle of March through, call it the middle of May, that now is the time to try to capitalize on a new level of engagement that we haven't seen yet. And I think really it's my team's job to make sure that we're creating advertiser content that fits very naturally into that consumption cycle for our audience. We don't want to disrupt their editorial experience. We want to complement it, and we want to do something special for them on behalf of a brand. I think brands, more so than ever, are eager to tell stories, eager to be a part of the day, meaning not to ignore all of the things that are happening in the world, but instead to participate in it meaningfully. And I think really what we're seeing also is that advertisers need to take advantage of the folks who are at home and who need things. So we're also seeing a ton of lower funnel work than we'd seen in years past. So we've built out shopper modules that allow people to actually purchase product in real time once they're consuming the native content that my team generates. Shoppable video is hot, all over again. We're taking more and more advantage of smart codes in print to link back to digital experiences, because we know people have gotten more comfortable using them, and we know that people have time to interact. So again, I think that advertisers are capitalizing on a moment where we have people's attention, and that's a great thing for us.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's very much the trend we're seeing more broadly. Everybody's spending more time at home. They've got more time to focus on their home lives, and they want to be able to interact with great content and transact with that. So I think that's very much
I think just to go one step further, and this is a benefit of working within Meredith, is especially in the United States, and I know the same is true for a lot of the UK. But people also really, really need a break from the news. Yeah. So if you've got strong lifestyle properties that allow people to, think about how to make their home more comfortable, or how to get more out of their workout, or how to make the most out of dinner with their kids, it's a break from what seems to be a never-ending negative news cycle. And I think that, again, we're benefiting from delivering content that makes people happy.
Absolutely. Well, let's dig into the report then. You've got 3 key findings in there. Flexibility first, be real, and less is more. So let's start by asking you about flexibility first. Just tell us what that means and give us some examples of how that works in practice.
For sure. So, flexibility first is a great mantra, and it's one that we use all the time. And when we talk about the importance of flexibility, we're talking about more than just being flexible in terms of like how you produce content. I'm also talking to my peers on the publishing side, where today demands that you are more flexible on rates, that you are more flexible on cancellation clauses or on original flight dates. You need to be a solid and good faith business partner to operate in today's world, because the world is demanding that we be flexible in order to create content that feels right in the moment we create it. So again, and this is a campaign that we spoke about a bit at the World Congress, but I'd love to share some more about the work that we did with Johnson's & Johnson's for a campaign highlighting their baby products. This was created really towards the very start of the pandemic. The production actually happened in March and April. So again, we were creating the rules of the road as we were driving the car. And generally speaking, when you work with a pharma company, the idea of finding a partner who is flexible, who will tweak approval processes, who will be comfortable with changes to the way we produce content in terms of like having a client on set, for instance. It's unusual in any space, but it's particularly unusual in pharma. And while we're talking about OTC brands here, not DTC brands, Johnson's is a company that takes every precaution to make sure that they're creating correct content that speaks about the virtues of its products without overselling them.
Yeah.
But also that they're doing it in a legally compliant way, et cetera, et cetera. And what I think that what we did together brilliantly here was generate a tonnage of content, house it in one place, deliver extreme expertise and utility in one environment to new and expectant moms during a time in which there isn't really good advice out there, because no one knew really what it was to have a baby in the midst of a global pandemic.
Yeah.
And what we built together is something that we're incredibly proud of. So I'm going to show that for a second, James. I'll scroll through the experience quickly, just to give people a taste of what it is we made here.
Just while you're doing that, let me ask you, so one of the things you're saying there is that it's important as much for you to be flexible in creation of content, but also important to impress upon the brands you're working with their need to be flexible. Is that one of the key findings here?
Yes, and I think within reason, right? I think we all know, for all of us in a client-facing role, that the client's in the driver's seat.
Yeah.
So I think really the most important thing is to make your client feel comfortable and to generate an unusual level of trust, both with your agency partner and ideally in a client direct fashion, so that you're given a leash to make important on the ground decisions to generate the content we need to make. So again, James, can you see my screen okay?
Yes, we can, yeah. And we can see some of the brands on there that we mentioned as well, parents and people.
Absolutely, yes. So this was a partnership with a number of Meredith brands, all created in partnership with Johnson's and specifically J Baby. And really what we did was we created these tiles. For instance, here we talk about what to actually pack for the hospital during a pandemic.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of those things are going to be things you'd always bring, but some of them aren't. Like, you didn't used to have to go to a hospital with masks and gloves, for instance.
Yeah.
Now it's a good idea to. Moving on from here, how can you actually support? So, like, if my sister, for instance, is expecting a child, how can I be a good support system for her as she, brings a baby into the world, and while the world is a very, very different place.
Yeah.
And then, this is some work down here, which was a relatively new format for us to pursue, and one that's performed quite well for us, which is really almost audio diaries, where we had doulas, nurses, and a handful of new moms actually relay their experience from the delivery room in an extremely natural and personal way. And this, again, this didn't require any of us to be on the ground with these people. This allowed them to maintain their privacy, to enjoy their moment of bringing new life into the world.
Yeah.
But to still tell an important story on behalf of, our brands and, of course, Johnson's.
So are they capturing that on their cell phone? Is that how that's working?
That's exactly right, yeah. And then we, audio mix it on our end to make sure that it sounds right. But yeah, this is not rocket science. This is trusting capable people to capture audio. We tweak it if necessary, and we pop it right on there with a thumbnail image.
So this is almost like quasi UGC. It's not quite UGC because you're directing them as to what to do, but they're creating it as if it was UGC.
That's exactly right, James. And I think today we're going to spend a fair amount of time talking about the kind of the new value of UGC and also how the definition of UGC has kind of changed a bit. Yeah. There's while of course there is still a place for calls for people to just generate content for both editorial brands and for branded content initiatives. what we're also seeing is an extraordinary opportunity to leverage influencers as creators, but to not let go of production control. So really what we can do, and what we did with Johnson's, was tap influencers who knew how to make things, not just who had amazing stories and a big following, but who knew how to make things. And two, we armed them with equipment to capture content of a certain quality. So if I scroll down here a little bit more, I'll get down here into the video section here, which I'm not sure if it's worth playing. I'll put it on for a minute so you guys can get a quick sense.
I think it's important to see this because you're then going to tell us how you did it.
I am a board certified obstetrician/gynecologist practicing in Washington, D.C. These are very uncertain times. As an expecting mom myself, I know that you're very concerned about anything that could potentially go wrong. So moms, we have to focus on what we can control. Continue to eat healthy when possible, exercise when possible. You want to keep washing your hands, wear your masks, avoid sick contacts, take care of yourself physically, take care of yourself mentally. You're going into the hospital.
So I'm gonna pause it there. And I think really what I wanted to illustrate with these videos, at least to me, and keep me honest on this, James, but this looks quite premium to me. It looks staged. It's extremely high fidelity. The audio captures there. There are natural cuts in the content. It feels like that behind the camera there's probably 10 or 15 people.
Yeah, definitely.
There's no one there. So really what we did was we leveraged a new approach that really takes advantage of drop kits, which include either like the newest version of an iPhone or, James, like your SLR with a ring light. And what we do is we then tap into an app called OpenReel to virtually direct this influencer to kind of hit the key talking points that we need her to hit, to do it in the time frame that we need her to do it in, and to make sure that the lighting is correct and that everything is captured the way that we want it to. An app like OpenReel also allows for us to stream that experience to a client. So while we are talking about the importance of flexibility, I am not suggesting that we sacrifice collaboration. In fact, I think collaboration at this point is more important than ever. It's just you have to do it a little bit differently than you're used to. So because you're not on set does not mean that your client can't be on set. It means they have to be on set virtually. And it's contingent on all of us in the creation space to deliver that experience to our clients in a way that they're comfortable with and can actually participate in.
And we're at this nice place now, aren't we, where the cost of equipment and the quality of that equipment, the cost has dropped dramatically as the quality continues to increase. And we have allied to that cloud services that allow us to share video data and content much more easily than before. So this wouldn't have been feasible 5 years ago, but now it's entirely possible, not only during a pandemic, but for the future as well, right?
That's exactly right. Yeah, I think that everyone's ability to access great equipment is different than it was 5 years ago. For us, with very few exceptions, we don't own the equipment we use. We rent it out. It's easy. We can get it anywhere in the country very, very quickly. And it allows us to create what feel like, for lack of a better phrase, like non-local productions, despite the fact that none of us are there. We don't have to, James, I think one of the things that I often gloss over when we talk about this, about creating content in today's world. I also think that it's probably worth mentioning what it means to be a manager in today's world. And I think that, in years past, as a manager, your job kind of, before everything else, was to make sure that your employees were the most efficient versions of themselves that they could possibly be. And while that's certainly still a North Star at this point, in my opinion right now, our most important role as a manager is to keep our people safe, which is a really, quite new responsibility for people who have no public health background or understanding. And I think really, operating from a place of abundant caution while still, while pursuing aggressively the solutions that allow our creative people to be creative, but from a safe distance. That right now is, I think, perhaps the most important responsibility of any manager of a creative team today. And I think that, Johnson's is a perfect example of creating a huge amount of content. I mean, I skimmed over so much in that quick scroll, because you could also dive into each of those tiles and consume, a handful of additional pieces of content attached to them. But none of the content we created required our people to be anywhere outside of the comfort of their own home. And that was a first for us, and it's something that we continue to take advantage of.
I mean, this was a real concern when the pandemic started, wasn't it? How were we going to be able to create content if we can't all get together? But it sounds as though you're on the path to cracking that problem.
I think it's a problem that, I fear saying it a little bit, but I feel like it's a problem we've solved. I think that, we absolutely know how to create content when we can't be there. And what's exciting for us now, and it feels like kind of like a horse about to jump out of its start gate, but we are also seeing amazing new opportunity to actually get back on the ground. And a little bit later on, I'll show you some work that we did with Walmart Plus, specifically talking about transitioning from hyper aspirational content to more real content. But that's a shoot, and I'll walk you through that, where we did have people on the ground. We had a production team of north of 100 people, and guests, numbering right around 200 with an A-list celebrity all in one location. Now that was an extraordinary undertaking. I should probably save that for when we get to it, James. Just to tease it a little bit.
Don't steal the next example. We'll come back to that in a minute. I wanted to ask you though. I wanted to really hear you reinforce something that we've spoken about a lot at FIPP over the last few years, which is this importance of different formats. And I think this does speak to flexibility. The example you've given there has audio, video. You're going to speak later on about live events. Is it a must-have capability to be able to do all of these things now, certainly as a content shop, but even as a publisher?
I think it depends on your station as a creator. I think, at Meredith, it's really important that my group can create anything an advertiser wants to create. There are certain shops that won't need to have that. For instance, when an advertiser calls us and say, hey, we have grand aspirations for virtual reality, we're going to say yes, and we're going to figure that out. Yeah. Not everyone needs to. But I do think that there are certain baselines of capabilities that you need. And I think perhaps the most important one right now is video. Whether you're talking about editorial video creation or branded video creation, we know that engagement with video content is extraordinarily high, and it's naturally optimized for social platforms where everyone spends all their time. So I think that to be able to generate video, whether you're talking about, real life shooting, or if you're talking about animation, or if you're talking about, in studio stop motion experiences, you have to be able to create a moving image optimized for social today. If you can't do that, I think you're not in the best place. There are certainly platforms that lean more into the written word, which of course will always have an important place. Even for shops like mine, where we're still seeing 15 to 25% of our business tied up in article content or tentpole content, or elevated article content, where it's a heightened design experience, but it's still really rooted in the written word and custom imagery. And I think that if you can pair your offering in a way that allows clients to feel like they're getting scale and engagement, whatever medium you use to deliver against those two things, I think you'll survive just fine.
So I think you've answered. We had a question from the audience from Amir Safir, and I think you've answered it. He says, if a publisher had to prioritize between the platforms we've discussed today, audio, video, or print, or flat digital content, which one would you recommend putting most resources and effort into, because some publishers can't focus on all of them at once? Presumably you'd say video.
Yeah, I would say video. I think that the upside is greater. I think that, generally speaking, both talking to you, James, and, my peers in the audience, video is great from a business standpoint. It's usually a larger client undertaking. So, the revenue attached to video experiences are higher. And I think that, especially in a moment like this, our opportunities to find cost-efficient ways of creating premium videos is extraordinary. So I think the upside potential for video is much higher, for instance, than flat digital content. I think that, print is absolutely alive and well. I think that, what we'll see over the next couple of years is, continued aggregation of the print experience all over the world. But print will always have a place. People like having things in their hand. A year and a half ago, my creative director and I actually created T-shirts for our team that said "Print is the new black." And I think it's funny. At work we always talk about how Foundry is technically in Meredith's digital organization, but we deliver about a third of our revenue in print. And that's whether we're talking about kind of more standard advertorials, custom gatefolds, cover wrap businesses, or smart code generations out to a digital experience. The print medium for us is very, very important in so many ways because of how many people have it in their hands. Yeah. We also know that, similar to like in the video space, if you're creating video for Instagram versus YouTube, the length of the video that you create should be reflective of how people consume content on those channels. So in YouTube, for instance, I've always argued that it's much more of a lean back experience. People are on YouTube to consume video, and they're probably going to do it for a while. So there's no reason to optimize towards a 30 to 45 second view time if you have an opportunity to keep someone's attention for 3 minutes. So again, I think that I do see the most long-winded answer in the world. I think video is the biggest upside for publishers right now.
Great, fantastic. Let's move on to the next strand, which is Be Real. Tell us about Be Real.
So being real in so many ways means don't ignore the world around you, right? So I think in so many ways, we right now cannot, as individual people, pursue our highest aspirations realistically. Like, great for instance, my wife and I have been itching to go on a beach vacation for a couple of years, and we were really hoping to make it happen this year. It's not going to happen. So how do we, for example, at Travel and Leisure, right? One of our big brands. How can they start catering to people like me, who probably saved up for a vacation that would take them out to a beautiful beach somewhere, but instead show them an amazing, culinary focused bed and breakfast experience in the Catskills, which is an hour and a half drive, where there are only really ever 10 to 15 guests. They are distanced. It is safe. Like I think that giving people alternatives to their highest aspirations, and in some ways to give them digital versions of their highest aspirations. Like one of the things that impressed me so much about Travel and Leisure, especially early on in the pandemic, was their initiative to actually create digital experiences of major cultural and historical locations of importance, right? Whether that's creating the digital experience of the Louvre or going to the Wailing Wall in Jerusalem and letting people actually have a digital experience of that, as opposed to just saying, you can't do it this year, so you're just not going to see it. You know what I mean? The piece of content that I want to show that I want to show you guys is what I alluded to before is Walmart Plus. And Walmart has been one of Foundry's most important clients.
In 2020.
Video audio played there for a second. Give me one moment. But I want to share my screen, and what you'll notice in the video that I show is that the production value is extraordinarily high. You'll see a lot of people around, but you'll also see those people wearing masks. So while I spoke a lot about how this was the biggest and most aspirational professional shoot that we've done, I don't think it distorts the reality that all of us live in. So I'm going to show that now, James. I'll keep it relatively brief, but I do want to show the video here. Can you see that okay?
Yep, we can see that.
Just want to make this big.
As you know, a lot of events have been getting canceled in 2020, but not Halloween, not on my watch. I teamed up with Walmart Plus to create the most epic experience that you could possibly imagine for these particular Halloween-obsessed families. Like the Swan Finches, huge Halloween fans and Walmart Plus members. They have no idea what's in store for them.
Whoa, look how cool! Those are jack-o'-lanterns, right? Oh my gosh! Come see!
Alright, people. You thought the tricks was done, but Walmart Plus and I have one last trick up our sleeve. I go by the name of Jason Derulo, and it's my absolute pleasure to be here. Big thank you to Walmart Plus for putting this all together. Honestly, I think it's time that we celebrate Halloween.
Walmart Plus saved me so much time in my regular life. Thank you so much for this wonderful experience. It has been absolutely phenomenal.
So I'll stop sharing there. And again, that's as big as we get, right? That involved us, as Foundry and as Meredith and as Walmart Plus, taking over Griffith Park in Los Angeles, setting up a rapid test COVID facility to accommodate 300 to 400 people. But also, there were tiny little things in that video that you have to have kind of a close eye to catch. One you don't need, but you'll notice that every kid and family member that you see in that video is masked. One. Yeah. Two, in the towards the end of the video, when you see people dancing during the performance that Jason Derulo gave, if you actually look closely at the ground, there are taped squares on the ground. And those are designated sections for each family that we invited. And it's fun as you actually dive in deeper to the content we created with Walmart Plus. You'll know that every family that we included in this experience are first responders or essential workers, hand-selected together with Walmart. And I think, again, while it feels huge, it doesn't feel like a departure at all from the world we live in today. And I think, to go a step further, because I do want to give credit where credit's due for this campaign in particular, that I think that this really accurately encapsulates all of the pillars that we're talking about today in terms of, flexibility first, more real content being real, and then the importance really of, collaborating constantly. But, this production was done in 6 weeks. So from the receipt of IO to the actual event, we had 6 weeks to get it off the ground. Also, my group does not throw concerts as a business model. This is new for us. So for 3 weeks of that 6-week timeline, we were planning on working with one A-list celebrity who ended up having to pull out because he had sold his music catalog to another platform already and forgot. And we had another A-list celebrity who we had teed up ready for this experience, who pulled out 5 days before the concert. Because he didn't want to risk COVID, because that felt new to him 5 days before. And and to Walmart's credit, because when that happened in particular, we were freaked out. I mean, we had a ton of money tied up in this production already. We were building stages and all of the sets that you saw on location there, and we were concerned that Walmart might say, if you can't get us the 2 people who we already said yes to, then we don't want to do it. Yeah. But to Walmart's credit, they rolled with the punches. They remained flexible. They trusted us, and they allowed us to source a talent in 5 days. And I think it came together. And what we know right now is that Meredith is standing out for Walmart Plus as its top performing partner because of this execution. And I think that that's just a testament to the value that you can derive if you implement across the pillars that we're talking about here, James, being flexible, being real, and truly collaborating constantly.
But I think also that example, the Walmart Plus example, does show a way forward for events in the future as well, doesn't it? You've got everybody masked, you've got people socially distanced, they're still having a good time, they're having to space out a bit more than before, but fundamentally the experience is still there. I mean, that must be encouraging for at least the next 6-9 months. You've got a way that you can run events if a client wants to do that.
Yeah, and I think, it's also a moment in time where it's really important to remember that all of our peers in the creative space are going through the same things that we are. And what I've noticed, whether we're talking about figuring out ways to produce something, whether we're talking about ways to diversify our staff, for instance, more than ever, I've seen an unusual willingness from peers at the very senior levels across our business to actually just get on the phone and talk to you and give you some advice.
Yeah.
And I think that, for all of you on the phone, that's an open invitation. Feel free to reach out to me if you have something on your mind that you'd like some advice on. But I also think it's just something that we should all keep in mind, in that, just like we said in the J Baby campaign, in so many ways, we are all in it together here in the creative space, trying to make sense of the world we're living in now. But James, you're absolutely right. This does give us a model for creating a safe, large event. Really, no matter the environment we're in. Now, I think that it's important to note, right, that to keep it safe added an enormous layer of cost that did not exist before. So between friends here, right, just the COVID piece of this, the COVID testing piece of this experience was a high 5-figure number to make sure we did it the right way.
So it's not cheap, but it's possible, but it's not cheap.
That's right.
Okay, well, that's definitely going to be one of the themes of COVID, I think. Everything's possible.
And I think that, to again, just reinforce the value of asking for help right now. Just last week, I got on a call with the events team for People Magazine, my brand, to talk them through the best practices that we implemented to achieve an event of that stature.
Yeah.
And I think that, usually it's me calling our editorial teams begging for advice. And this time it was flipped around, and that was kind of fun for me. But, again, not only is my team now armed, but our editorial counterparts are armed with the ability to create amazing events on the ground right now.
Absolutely. Will, we're running out of time, so we've got one more strand to cover. So let's get on to that. The last one, which is counterintuitive in what you've called it. Less is more. Tell me, why is less more?
So less is more in a whole lot of ways. And I think, the Johnson's campaign earlier is a great example of that. And I'm going to show you some work that we did for Cheerios in a minute. And I think less is more, it resonates for a number of reasons. But I think that the biggest thing is that you don't need to hit people 1,000 times with a message. You need to hit someone. And by the way, this is not COVID, right? This is a standard. This is a standard best practice that all of us should have had in mind for years. And I think, as the industry in so many ways was, I think, in a bit of a race to the bottom for a while, where your ability as a branded content shop to succeed was predicated on your ability to deliver tonnage of content, not necessarily quality of content.
Yeah,
I think that we're starting to see that swing back the other way, where you pick your spots a little bit more carefully, where you vet your influencers a lot more thoroughly, because, by the way, they're also going to vet you. But I think, to go back to Johnson's, which you've all seen already, that was a situation where, because of the amount of content we created, there was nothing stopping us from creating 50 different landing pages for the content.
Yeah.
But to create one dedicated environment where all the information lives allowed a user to much more seamlessly get the information she needed in the moment, the way that she wanted to, without having to, ignore 10,000 ads that we hit her with in the course of a week. This was, extremely targeted, highly curated environment. That again, while there was a lot there, it was all in one place. And I think that just to kind of capture the value of less is more there. I'm also just while time allows, I'm going to show you something that we did for Cheerios. This is one of a handful of pieces of content that we created for them. Listen, I don't think there's any other way to say it. It's simple. Its brand integration is pretty soft, but it is it's a piece of content that that Cheerios has been excited about. They're super thrilled with the campaign that we've lifted off for them. And I'm just going to show you one piece of content we created for Cheerios that lives on shape.com. Because I think it's important that to remember that we don't always have to recreate the wheel here. Okay, so what you'll notice is standard ad placements, obviously logo lockup within the editorial environment or the branded content environment here. And really, this is about how to make the most out of your morning, which Cheerios argues, and what we agree with, is that they help you make the most out of your morning too. And here is truly content created for the American woman who want to make a lot out of their morning with a quick, 10-step exercise routine.
And that's using one of the oldest forms of digital content. That's a GIF, right? So you've got a bunch of GIFs there just showing
That's
everybody.
exactly right. And by the way, like I said before, for Johnson's again, none of us were on the ground for this. So this is an influencer who created this for us.
Yeah.
Again, with a drop kit, with a virtual directing, and with a client participating. And again, is it the most innovative content you've ever seen? Probably not. But it's exactly the kind of content that actually does deliver a utility for the woman that Cheerios is trying to reach.
Simple, easy, mobile friendly as well, so people can follow along on their phone while they're doing exercise. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think again, I think I maybe even mentioned this at the World Congress, but it's one of my favorite anecdotes of the last many months. But I know, at least for the Americans on the phone, I think in the UK, I'm not sure if you guys got the chance to view the Netflix show that now has like a cult following called Tiger King.
Oh yes, we've all been watching Tiger King. Absolutely.
Joe Exotic, the man of the people. Absolute psychopath, but what great television it makes for. I bring it up simply because after Netflix clocked the level of interest in that show, they actually executed a cast reunion with a celebrity host, literally from his living room, interviewing the participants of Tiger King by Zoom.
Yeah.
So I think the reason I bring it up is because if it's good enough for Netflix, it's probably good enough for us too. And I think, what we know, right, is that, all of us spend all day sitting in front of our monitors on video calls. And I think that what we've learned is that people are actually quite used to seeing conversations and interviews and content captures happening on Zoom, or for us at Meredith on WebEx, on any number of video platforms that you might be using. And to utilize a similar technology for the creation of advertising content is not crazy at all. And I think that done the right way, it can actually be quite effective.
Well, we're running out of time here. So thank you very much for those three different strands there and the different insights that you put behind them. I wanted to close, though, by asking you where you personally and where you, with your Foundry hat on, would see content creation going in the future. What are your thoughts there?
That's a great question. It's a big question. And I'm not going to pretend to have a crystal ball. But I think that the future of branded content is bright. And I know that that's not necessarily the most widely shared belief. But I think what we're seeing, right, is, and I think it's probably only been accelerated by COVID. It's not because of COVID, but accelerated by COVID, is, all of the publishing world, right, has learned that there is extraordinary value in developing programmatic solutions for their inventory. And advertisers, in a similar way, are recognizing that, hey, you know what? I don't need to take 50 sales calls a week to get access to inventory I really want. And I'm definitely going to lean into the programmatic space. But what doesn't the programmatic space deliver me? And I think the answer will always be, one, custom content. And I think, to build upon that, the benefits of like strategic partnerships in terms of like big data and insight generation. I also think more technically complicated ad unit experiences, for example, like AI generated shoppable units. Those are not going to be programmatic solutions. So I think really what you're looking at is actually a narrowing of what will be desired in a direct sales capacity. Because so much of what we all have access to can be bought and sold on a platform.
Yes.
So I think for us, while we will of course see programmatic grow, I think that the direct world will maintain, and even if it shrinks a little bit, the opportunities within in the direct sale world are going to be relatively narrow, and I think that will benefit branded content shops longer term, shops that have extreme data capabilities, and shops that do have the technical aptitude to create the best shoppable experiences online.
Fantastic. Well, Will, listen, thank you very much for taking the time to join us once again. I know that this video will be as popular as your last appearance with us, so thank you very much for
It's
that.
my pleasure, James. Thanks for having me.